The I wanted to mention too, Jim Grubb. Next week we're building a fence behind the parsonage. We own the house, the church does, right beside us here, and we're building a fence behind that next week. If you are somebody who could help with that, he only needs a few workers, 6 or 7. But if you're somebody who could help with that, we're going to have the post holes already dug out. Just gotta set the fence, put the Quikrete in, get it right. I want to say it'll be easy, but it's never as easy as you think it ought to be. So if you can help with that and you've got some experience about helping with that, let us know that on the card too, if you don't mind. That I could help next week, and Jim or I, one, or Lori will give you a call and we'll let you know. But it's probably next Saturday at 8 o'clock, getting ready to start. If you find out later in the week you can come and you don't sign up now, then show up. But plan for that if you can, so we can plan for it, so we know who else is going to be here to help out with that, if you don't mind. Okay. We are in the middle of a series. We're just, this is our second week. So if it's your first week to come here, you've picked a good week. We're just getting started with some stuff that I think that kind of hits everybody. It's dealing with difficult people. It's dealing with people who can be kind of a trial or kind of a challenge for you to deal with for one reason or another. Last week we talked about people who are mean. And they're just natural. They're mean. Everybody knows they're mean. It's their reputation. They kind of bully people, or they're angry a lot, or they're ticked off a lot. And how to deal with that. And this week I wanted to deal with people who seem like they're kind of needy. Like when you talk to them, it seems like they just have a lot of needs. And every time you talk to them, it seems like they have a lot of needs. Now as we get into this thing, what I tried to say last week is still true today. It's certainly not every mean person. Some people are just having a bad day. I'm not talking about that. And I'm not talking about somebody who is needy because, their house burned down. You'd be needy too if your house burned down. I'm not talking about that either. It's the person who's kind of known for that. Like it's their reputation. It's the person who, when you take a new job, they warn you about them. Hey, watch out for Frank. Don't get on Susan's bad list. Once you're there, you're never getting off. And so you learn to avoid them. Everybody at the workplace already knows it before you get there. You could get the same warning when you move into a neighborhood. The other neighbors tell you, hey, be careful about getting off on their wrong side. The Joneses will never forget. And so you just learn how to deal with people like that. And as Christians, I think we're called to a little higher standard. Now, last week, to talk about people who are mean, I mentioned my neighbor. In California, one of my neighbors I had, who was rough on a lot of people, and I didn't mention him by name, but I mentioned him. Though I'm going to tell you, he's proud of all of it. He regrets nothing about any of that, or at least he didn't last time we talked. Was convinced that he was right. I don't know if he watches my sermons or not. If he does, he might have been surprised to hear me mention him last week. But again, I'm going to tell you that we've talked, he and I, and that that's just how he is. And he was one of those guys who would tell you, hey, it's just how I am. If you don't like it, leave. So I just left. He was like that. It's harder with people who are needy. Like people who are naturally kind of mean, a lot of those people kind of take pride in being mean. They're not embarrassed about it at all. It doesn't feel bad. They don't regret it. It's kind of intentional. But people who are needy very rarely intend to be needy, and often would be surprised if you thought they were needy. It's a little different animal, and it's hard to illustrate it with somebody else because of that. So I'll illustrate it with myself if I can, just for a minute. When Julia and I were on vacation once, we lived in California and we were driving back here. We stopped in Amarillo for the evening at a pretty nice hotel, and we went. Oh, I thought it was nice, and we went to go swimming with the kids. We told them if they'd be good, we'd go swim. When we got there, we went swimming, came back to our hotel room, and somebody had stolen Julia's purse, had broken in and stolen Julia's purse, and I had my shorts on the ground there. It had my billfold up keys in it. They took my shorts and her purse, and they broke into the room and left. So we had no keys to the van anymore, and we had no money, and we had no paperwork, no proof of who we were. So we called the police, and the police wrote up the report, and I got the detective's number. I called the church that we were serving in California, and the church credit card, they gave me the church credit card number. I wrote it down on a piece of paper with the expiration date and the little numbers on the back there. So I had that written down on a piece of paper, and that's really all I had. And it took us all day long. Time we got the new key for the van and everything else to get out of there. But we didn't want to stay in Amarillo one other night. Amarillo's a fine town, except for that one hotel. And so we took off. And we got to about Arkansas, and neither one of us, Julia and I, neither one could drive. We were both just really tired. It'd been a long day. Kids were whiny. It's been an awful day. And so we pulled off to a hotel. You know, it's really hard to rent a hotel room if all you've got is a credit card written down on a piece of paper. It's really hard to convince someone that you're a good risk to spend the night. I showed him the number we had for the detective. Here's the number. You know, we can call this guy and would confirm everything, but that means nothing to that guy. The guy at the hotel guy means nothing to him. He doesn't want to call the number. And you're having to beg for it. And it was really kind of eye-opening. At church, sometimes we will get calls from people in our community who don't go to church, but they're in a need, and they will call the church because they think the church might help when nobody else would. And hey, could you help me with my gas, or could you help me with my groceries, or could you help me with whatever else? And if you get a lot of those calls, you can get kind of suspicious about people when the only reason they're calling the church is because they want something, they need something. Give me this, give me that. And you can wonder if you're getting conned or if you're getting lied to. And being on the other side of that for an evening, where you're having to beg somebody to let you stay in the hotel and promising them that number is a good number and it's not a stolen number and you can call this person to confirm. And we finally were able to convince him to let us stay, but he might have called the sheriff as soon as we left the room. We never talked to the sheriff, so I don't know for sure. But having that feeling, they're looking at you with distrust. Looking at you like you're suspicious, looking at you like you're inconveniencing them just by being there. It was really eye-opening. And I am convinced that most of us spend some time in that sooner or later. Sooner or later, because of some personal tragedy in our lives or because of maybe mistakes that we've made or just because of how life works, you can find yourself in that spot. And how you deal with other people in that spot says a lot about you as a Christian. Rick Warren, in one of his books, he said, in every church, in every small group, there's at least one difficult person, usually more than one. These people may have special emotional needs or deep insecurities, irritating manners, or poor social skills. He says you might call them EGR people, extra grace required. And by the way, he goes on in the chapter to say, every group has one of these, and if you don't know who it is in your group, that it's you. It's you. Anyway, the next sentence is, God put these people in our midst for both their benefit and ours. They're an opportunity for growth and a test of fellowship. Can we love them as brothers and sisters and treat them with dignity? Warren believes that God puts those people in our lives to test us at some level, to see if we'll be to them like Jesus has been to us. Jesus says roughly the same thing in Luke 6. He says, if you only love those who love you, well, what credit is that? Now, by the way, it's not bad to love those who love you. If you're a parent and your kids love you and you love the kids, that's a good thing. It's not bad. But he says what credit is to you. Even sinners do that. He says, and if you do good to those who do good to you, well, what credit is that to you? I mean, it's nothing special. Everybody does good for somebody who does good to them first. He says, and if you lend to someone from whom you expect repayment, well, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners, expecting to be paid in full. But he says you want to love your enemies and do good to them and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Because when you do it, then, when you do that, your reward, he says, will be great. And you'll be like children of God because he's kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. All of us, sooner or later, with God, are ungrateful and wicked. All of us, sooner or later, don't thank God like we should for the things that he's done. All of us, sooner or later, will do certain things that we know God really doesn't like, but we do them anyway, knowing that we're saved by grace and maybe even presuming a little bit upon that grace. And Christ continues to be good. God continues to be good to us. And so we want to be followers of him, then we have to be good to people even if sometimes they're a trial. When I was studying for this thing, I found this coffee mug for sale. It says, someone's therapist knows all about you, if you can't read it from the back there. Somebody can't stand you, for sure, right? Somebody, you are all they talk about when they're talking to their counselor, when they're talking to their therapist. Just getting through you every day is a trial for them. And if you don't know who that is, well, good, but everybody has that. If you've got a strong personality at all, somebody doesn't like it. For somebody, you're a trial. But Jesus, he deals with us even when we're a trial. And even though you know this about yourself, sometimes you can still think that you're better than someone else and that they don't deserve your attention. They don't deserve your kindness. They don't deserve your compassion. Romans 12, verse 18 says, if it's possible, we should do good to everybody. If it's possible, we should make it work. Now, one last thing here before we get into the story, the Bible story, and talk about that. Again, I know that most of our relationships are getting stuff from one another or doing stuff for one another. A lot of our, like I'm friends with my barber, I'm friends with my mechanic, but most of our relationship is determined by me going to them to get something done that I pay for. That's how we became friends. They've always been fair to me, and I think we'd be friends even if I didn't go to them anymore. I think we would still be friends, but a lot of our friendship is based on that transaction. A lot of our acquaintances are based on that. As a church, some people who would never necessarily invite me into their home, if something bad happens, they want me to come help, and that's what I do. I want to help. I'm thrilled to do it, but I can't start looking at people like they're the enemy when they come to me asking for that sort of thing, because that's part of what we do, right? I'm not talking about any of that. I'm talking about the person in your life who is extra grace required. That when you see them walk up towards you, your stomach kind of tightens up. That you can feel your gas tank emptying as you're talking to them. You can feel that happening. I'm talking about the person who every time you talk to them seems to want more and more and more, and it's hard because they monopolize your time. That's who I'm talking about. That's the struggle. And if you don't have anybody like that in your life, well, great. But I bet a lot of you do. And so how do you deal with them in a Christian manner? That's the point of today's sermon and dealing with that. I'm going to tell a story. It's a Jesus story. It's in Matthew chapter 15. In Matthew 15, it says that he left that place and he withdrew to the region of Tyre and Sidon. Tyre and Sidon are both on the Mediterranean coast. They're both beach towns. It's like retiring to Myrtle Beach. You know, he withdrew to a place that he could just rest maybe for a little while. That leaving that place, if we read the story right before this, he's been in some conflict. People were arguing with him and giving him a hard time because Jesus is saying that he's God's son. Jesus is saying that he's the only way to God. It was offending some people. And so he left that place and he goes to the beach. That's what the first verse here says. When Mark tells the same story, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are all the stories about Jesus. In the book of Mark, telling the same story, it says Jesus left that place and he went to Tyre and he was trying to keep it quiet. He didn't want anyone to know it, but he couldn't keep it secret. He was hoping he could slide in and nobody would know that he was there. So you need to get that picture in your head that Jesus is trying to get away from it all. But it was impossible. He's too famous. And so a Canaanite woman from that area came to him and she's crying out, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me. My daughter is demon-possessed and she is suffering terribly." And Jesus doesn't answer at first. Now, I'm going to say about this whole story, it's a hard story. And if you read about it and study about it, you will find that very smart people disagree about everything that's going on here. Okay? And I'm not going to be able to explain 100%. It's one of those stories that I'm convinced is true, that Jesus really did it, that it really happened. Because if you were just making up religion, you wouldn't put this one in there. It's too hard. You wouldn't put this one in there if you were just making stuff up. And so if we leave this and it raises questions in your head about Jesus, that's okay. It's that kind of story. So don't feel like you're a bad person if it. But anyway, she doesn't answer. So this woman has come in. Jesus is at the beach. Maybe he's watching the waves come in, right? And he's sitting there with his guys. Maybe they've come here to get away from it all. And while he's there, this woman comes along. And it says she's a Canaanite woman. It's the first thing it told us. So she's not Jewish. She doesn't believe in the same God that Jesus believes in. She doesn't follow the same rules that Jesus follows. In fact, probably doesn't follow Jesus, but knows that Jesus can help her. And so she's coming to him hoping to get something from him. She has no relationship with him. She just wants to get something from him. And he's at the beach. Now, some of you guys, when you travel, You maybe you don't carry your cell phone, or you don't answer it if it looks like it might be work. You just don't answer at all. Others of you can't not answer it. You're told by work, you better answer it wherever you are, and you have to answer it no matter where. And for those people who have to answer it, no matter where you're at, you can imagine you're at the beach or you're on vacation, you see that number and your heart sinks because you know it's going to be an hour of conversation. Your family sees you looking at the phone. It's not work, is it? Yeah, it's work. And so you got to answer it. And so that's what's going on. And Jesus doesn't answer, which is kind of mean. If we're being completely honest about it, it's kind of mean. And the disciples jump in there. They said, send her away because she just keeps crying after us. Now, most people think, and I do too, when I was studying about this, that the disciples are probably hoping that Jesus will heal her daughter. Just take care of this, Jesus. Get her out of here. You know, give her what she wants. Send her down the road because we can't get any peace with her over here crying like this. So there's not a lot of sympathy there. They just want to deal with it and let's move on. And Jesus answers to her, I was only sent to the lost sheep of Israel. And remember, she's Canaanite. So what he's telling her is, I wasn't sent here for you. I'm not here for you. And there's no way to read that other than a little bit of a dig at her, like, leave me alone. And you don't like to think that Jesus could ever say something like that, but he's saying something like that right here. We're reading it. And he says, I wasn't sent for you. And the woman doesn't give up, though. She comes up to him and she kneels in front of him. Lord, you have to help me, she said. And then he replied, it's not right to take the children's bread and give it to the dogs. Now, there's all sorts of opinions about what's going on here, but the part you can't get away from is this is an insult. It's a dig. He is insulting the woman. Did Jesus ever insult anybody? Yes. The answer to that trivia question is yes. He does it right here. Now, the question is, well, why does he do it? And there's all sorts of opinions about that, and I don't pretend to know for sure, but it seems like to me that he's testing her somehow. He's making it intentionally difficult for her to see if she'll keep coming. It seems like that's what he's doing. Why would he do that? I have no idea. I don't know. I know that he has done that to me sometimes, where I've prayed for something and hoped to get a quick answer, and I didn't get a quick answer for whatever reason. All I got was silence, or all I got was this empty feeling like nothing's ever going to get better. And the decision comes: do I keep coming back? Do I keep pushing? Do I keep digging, or do I just give up? And sometimes I'm sad to admit I've given up. I didn't get what I wanted quickly, and I just gave up on it. Other times I've just determined I'm going to keep praying. I'm going to keep coming back. I'm going to keep asking. I'm going to keep trusting that God is eventually going to come through. And that's what this woman does. Yes, Lord, she says, but even the dogs eat crumbs that fall off the master's table. He's trying to take a dig at her. She refuses to be dug at. She refuses to let it bother her. The Jews called people who weren't Jews dogs in that time. And she would have known that. And so when he takes this dig at her, it would have been easy for her to say, hey, if that's how you're going to treat me, forget it, and walk off. But she doesn't because her daughter still needs the help. That hasn't changed. And she still can't help her daughter. And that hasn't changed. And the only one who can fix her daughter is Jesus. And that hasn't changed. And so she just keeps coming after him. And Jesus says, I tell you, you've got great faith. Your request is granted, and her daughter was healed at that hour. Jesus only uses that phrase, great faith, twice in the stories about Jesus. And they're both times to people who weren't Jewish. Once is to a centurion who's asking for his servant to be healed, and then this woman. And in both cases, they just kept coming. They just wouldn't take no for an answer. And Jesus seems to admire that. When you refuse to give up, and you could do a whole other sermon just on that, actually. In your prayer time, Jesus seems to admire the person who just refuses to quit, who just keeps coming back in prayer, doesn't take no for an answer, just keeps coming back and asking God to move, trusting that God will do the right thing. And I could do a whole other sermon on that. But what I wanted to focus on is how Jesus deals with her. He wants to be at the beach. He's on vacation. He wants to kind of not pay attention to this thing, and this woman comes. His disciples want to send her away, but Jesus doesn't send her away. He doesn't dismiss her. He doesn't say no necessarily. He just keeps explaining what he had planned to do. Well, here was my plan. Here's what I was going to do. Here's why I'm here. This is what I'm about. And she just keeps coming. And Jesus eventually takes care of it. He eventually meets her need. He eventually does for her the very thing that she's asked him to do. So there's a couple of lessons I want to draw out of this and just think through about today's sermon. The first lesson, part of the first lesson, there are limits to what we can do. It's okay to take vacation. Jesus seems to have. It's okay to get away. It's okay to, every once in a while, turn your phone off. In fact, it's healthy to turn your phone off occasionally. It's a good thing sometimes just to you by yourself get away and take a walk, or you and your family get away and just try to rest your head. We're only given so many days on this world, and we only have so much energy, and we only have so many resources, and you're allowed to guard some of that. Moses in the Old Testament was so overwhelmed by people who wanted his attention that he finally got other people to help him, because he couldn't do it all by himself. And he got other people to help him, and the Bible commended that. In the New Testament, the apostles, Peter and James and John, those guys were getting overwhelmed by people who were wanting their help. And so they got some deacons to help them get through this thing, some other guys to come along and work beside them. And you're allowed to do that. It's not your job to solve all the world's problems. And sometimes it's okay to say no. Or it's okay to take a break, or it's okay to take a rest. There are limits, even in this story we just read, to what we can do. And yet, while there are limits to what we can do, I think as Christians, we have to do what we can. Because Jesus did. You are amazingly privileged. You live in a free country. If you have money in your pocket, you're richer than 90% of the rest of the world. If you've got some money that you're at your disposal that you can do anything you want to with, that doesn't go just to housing or food or shelter or water, you got a little money beyond just taking care of those basic needs, you're richer than almost every other human being in the world. And you know the truth. You know who God is. You know who Christ is. You know that heaven and hell await. You know where we're all headed. And and because of your privilege, I think you have to do what you can. Colossians chapter 3:13. This is actually a great verse. You could do a whole sermon just on it. It says, bear with each other and forgive one another if you've got a grievance against someone, and forgive like Christ forgave you. But this first thing, bear with one another. In different translations, some translations say be tolerant to one another. One translation says put up with one another. One translation I liked said make allowances for one another. I mean, assume ahead of time that, cut some slack, show some grace, try to understand, says one translation. The idea being, we were forgiven by God and we didn't deserve it. So when people come and they want to take your time or your energy or your attention or your money, man, be as graceful as you can. You're showing Christ when you do. You're showing Jesus to them when you do. Make a decision ahead of time that you're going to realize it could be you in the same situation, and you're going to try to reach the best you can. You're not going to gossip about them. One habit that I have that I've tried to work on my whole life, and I think I'm much better than I used to be. You don't gossip about it. If someone comes and says, and they're just constantly taking your time or your energy, it's very easy to go tell one of your friends. Man, can you believe they came again? Can you believe that they're asking for that again? Can you believe? And what it is a subtle way to get even with that person. I won't tell them no because I feel guilty, or I can't get them to stop because they're in such need. And so if I gossip about them, it's like I'm getting even. But you're not. You're just reducing your own character. You're just limiting who you are. So you don't gossip about it, you don't slander about it, you try not to take an ugly look at certain people, especially if they're people who have kind of worn you out a little bit through the years. You try to see them like Christ. Remember, Jesus is kind even to the ungrateful. And when you're kind to the ungrateful, you most reflect him. And then the second lesson, lesson one is, do what you can. But the second lesson, be humble enough to change course. Jesus hasn't said anything to this woman. In fact, he's already kind of indicated he's not going to help right off. And the disciples have went even further than that. They say, send her away. Send her away. She's a problem. Get rid of her, Jesus. Send her someplace else. But Jesus, he sees her need. I mean, she won't quit. And he eventually responds. Jesus is kind of characterized by being humble. But not just him. You can take the same lesson from that woman. It would have been very easy from the woman in that story to say, you know what? If that's how you feel, fine. And walk away. It would have been very easy for her to gossip about Jesus to her friends. Can you believe what he said to me? Can you believe he had the nerve to say that? Now her daughter would still be suffering. She would still be lost. But it would have been very easy for her to walk away in that situation. But she stays humble. And I think it's that humility that Jesus says, that's the great faith. She's willing to let Christ dictate the terms. She's willing to let Christ dictate how this is going to go. And because she's humble, she gets what she wants. Wisdom is being humble enough to see what God's about in the middle of this thing and hang in there and do it his way. And when somebody is after your energy or your time, or they're making it difficult for you to get what you want, it's very easy to either explode or walk away and gossip and slander and be mad and bitter. Humility is hanging in there, trusting God, and letting him work through it. I'm going to have the band come back up, if they don't mind. I want to challenge you here at the end of the service that you can do this, and that you can reach out to those people who sometimes can be a trial. And that when you do it, really in that moment more than any other, you're reflecting Christ. I've been listening to this podcast, The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill, and it's about a preacher in Seattle who had a really strong personality, a great speaker, great leader that way. And the church went from just a few people in this guy's living room to 15,000 people in just a few years. But he was mean to everybody, and he was obnoxious. And when he finally quit the church shrunk immediately. It was all built on him. It was all built on him. And it's an extraordinary story if you like podcasts. And as I'm listening to it as a preacher, he did some things that I would never do. And it's risky to say that, I know, but in my worst moment, I would never do. He did some things that I wouldn't think about doing. It just wouldn't occur to me, and if it had occurred to me, I wouldn't have done it. I just wouldn't have done it. But what bothered me as a preacher listening to it is this notion that the whole church was built on this guy's gifts. He spoke and he led, and because he was so good at those things, the church grew. And he's fantastically good at it, and the church grew a lot. But that model is often the model we see in church in America. Get somebody who can speak okay and talk okay and lead okay, and the church will grow. And if it's not growing, it must be because that guy's not doing one of those things right. Because if he was doing those things right, it would grow. That's the formula. So you find the right guy to make that happen, and then it will take off. And that was never Christ's formula. You are the hands and feet of Jesus. And when you show grace to somebody, especially somebody who does not deserve it and is not grateful for it, I mean, you're just being kind. It's a much better sermon than I could preach. And honestly, people who would never come in here once will find Jesus because of what you did. That's the model. That's always been the model. It's not about coming to listen to one guy talk. It's about you going out and being the hands and feet of Christ. And you're not commanded to do it exactly. And you're going to have moments where it doesn't work. I mean, some people are going to chew on you and you're going to lose it and wish you hadn't said what you said or walk away mad. You're going to fail. There's no being perfect at this thing. But every time you can show grace when anybody else would walk away, you advertise Jesus in such a powerful way you can't even imagine. And that is what church is supposed to be. That, when all of the people are making this commitment that they're going to try to put Christ's words into action all the time, that is his formula for growth. And it's that thing, honestly, that I'm praying for all the time. So here at the end of the service, we're going to give you a chance, if you want to come up and pray. And if you want to pray about that, you can. Pray about anything that's on your heart. If there's anybody that you're dealing with or anything that you need help with, come pray about it. It's also a chance for you to come up and make any decisions you need to make about following Christ more in a more dedicated way. And the people up here on the front can help you work through that. Won't you stand up? I'm going to pray with you here at the end of the service, and we'll close.